Scythe Tleppo, Chapter 17. Bug Ugly. When I arrived in Seattle, I wandered around looking for the university area. It seemed like a lot was going on up there, and I wanted to check it out. When I reached an area called Capitol Hill, I knew it was a spot for me. There were punks there and stuff to do. So many punk rockers that at any given moment there were a few wandering around Broadway Street. Something impossible to see in Albuquerque. I hung around a while and asked for spare coins from people walking by. I was back to living off fast food burgers and any scraps I could find. Only this time, I was alone. At first I slept in a park, but cops cleared it out regularly. I tried sleeping behind cars, but the owners got angry and sometimes called the cops. After hanging around for a few days, I started to talk to the street kids that I found. Anyone panhandling was a potential ally. By the end of the week, I teamed up with a cool, large, homeless lesbian lady. I felt she could protect me from the elements somehow, and that's what she did. She showed me a spot where a company had metal cages with lots of discarded cardboard boxes. We slept in there. By the time the cold rains came, I had enough friends to learn how the locals did it. Abandoned houses were all over the city, and those of us in the know could sneak into them and sleep. Some local punks and I slept in an abandoned house on Cherry Street, which was littered with trash and heroin paraphernalia. The buses in Seattle were cheap and plentiful, and the city was ultra-progressive. Everything was electric-powered, even those buses. It was like living in some futuristic terraforming community. Everything was green, and people rode bicycles everywhere. There were even punk rockers who looked down on us because we didn't ride bicycles. What a world. It showed me how fake people could really be. Everything in common, but not having a bicycle wasn't good enough for them. I didn't play their game, the eternal climb of the cool ladder. There would always be some other, cooler person to show you what to do next. No thanks. At that time in Seattle on the streets, there really was only one drug to do: heroin. I had never injected drugs before, but the kids there did it every day. It was like breakfast for some of them. I injected my first shot of heroin in a portable toilet right on a main street. It was for handicapped people, so it was large enough for a junkie friend of mine to inject me. First-timers get help. Otherwise, it's a bloody mess. I wandered out of that plastic booth and entered a new world. This is different. This drug had no personality, unlike the other drugs. No hallucinations, no mental tricks, no shadows or tracers from movement, no echoing of noises, no laughing. All this drug does is give a massive, immediate body high. And it was a body high like no other. I wandered around oblivious to anything around me, in bliss and comfort. Pain not only wasn't with me, it didn't even exist anymore. My heart and chest felt like there were sunbeams shining out of them, pacifying evil and clearing me out of troubles. It was long-lasting and friendly. This wasn't a drug like speed. This was a friend of the soul. Heroin can heal me. I made some pretty good friends there in Seattle, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Bug Ugly, another punker on the streets, was my best friend of all. I met him early on, and we were in sync from the first moment. When he found out how much heroin I was doing, he gave me the nickname Smack. After a few months, I decided to move on and Bug Ugly was down to come with. I love Seattle, but I did want to get to Albuquerque someday after all. Bug and I packed up and headed on, richer in no way other than experience. I had an inkling of how to survive alone on the streets, buy drugs, alcohol, and food with spare change, bed down, and repeat the process. We hitched down to Portland, Oregon. Spit. I suspected Portland would be the same formula. Ask around for the city center and look for street kids. Turns out that was exactly the way to do it. We arrived at Pioneer Courthouse Square and almost immediately ran into a street kid. Spit was a black punk rocker with a short mohawk and big lips. He wasn't muscular, but he was fit from trekking around with his backpack. He was a nice kid, which was rare on the streets. Bug, Spit, and I became friends right on the spot. Within 10 minutes, we were as tight as could be. Spit told us to hang on, he'd be right back, while a couple of other street kids joined us. We chatted some more, kind of getting the lay of the land. The other kids called Portland PDX and knew what was where. Portland had more facilities for homeless kids than Albuquerque, by far. Seattle had a lot too, and not just the churches that made you sit through a sermon before giving you some slop. Seattle and Portland had pretty good resources. Spit came walking back from around the corner, holding the front of his belt up with both hands. He looked blank, like a zombie. Without warning, he released his hands, and out dropped 2 huge wine boxes. He looked at us and said, "Well, are we going to drink or what?" We scooped up that wine and started walking. "Where can you drink around here?" I asked. "The rocks." We headed down towards the river. Out there was an area we called the rocks, which was a bunch of, rocks on the waterfront. We broke open the wine boxes to expose the silver bags inside, and the drinking began. We drank both space bags as we watched the ships working on the water. The other kids who joined us weren't the punks I used to know. They were dirtier and hairier. They downplayed the punk look and had more of a country boy feel to their clothes. They wore Carhartt overalls and had facial tattoos. They dressed like modern hobos, and that's what they identified with. They were train hoppers. I just thought they were some rednecks or something. Some oddities at first, but as time went on, I met more. Many, many more. In fact, this group of hobos is the center of the homeless punk world across America. In Portland, we slept down by a power plant in an open grass field, which was as nice as the weather allowed it to be. When the rains came, we moved under bridges or tried to find some house punks to let us sleep with them. There were always kids with homes hanging out with us. They wanted to taste the life without living it, and some of them were even preparing themselves for this life. That was the weirdest thing to me. Inside the punk subculture lies another subculture, and then another. There were all these categorizations and groups. And the one that surprised me the most were the kids who were preparing themselves to be homeless intentionally. Are these kids crazy? Who the hell would want to live in dirt? For me, Portland was another good city. Overall, the kids were good, and the atmosphere was very progressive. There was a needle exchange program, so any kids on the streets with dirty needles could go exchange them for clean ones. Anyone without clean needles stabbed their arms, toes, or neck with a barbed, hooked, dirty needle. That meant pain and disease. Stopping the injections wasn't an option. Heroin was our medicine. But the medicine's friendly face wouldn't show forever. Even I knew that. My heavy meth and LSD use had prepared me for an inevitable dark side of heroin. Bug wanted to go back to Seattle, but I wanted to go down south. We parted ways, and after saying my goodbyes, I left PDX. I walked on the side of the highway, thumb out, asking anyone to pick me up. Most cars and trucks flew by, uncaring, and occasionally someone screamed out, "Punk rock! Oi, oi, oi!" before driving off. Another yelled, "Get a job, loser!" Or the most common was, "Woo!" I didn't know I would never see Bug Ugly again. Saktos. Hitchhiking wasn't as eventful as what I had seen on the television as a kid. Mostly it was walking and more walking. The road was quiet during the day and just a bit too loud when sleeping under overpasses at night. There was nothing to read or listen to or escape to, just the mind itself. There was nothing to snack on and no water, other than what I had on me. Eventually someone picked me up. One day I passed a town called Hubbard. I couldn't help but think of the corporation, which had been such a huge part of my life. It made me think about my mother. Did she worry or feel anything about me anymore? Was she just living her life without me, in bliss? One driver who picked me up was an ex-punk rocker, on his way down to Sacramento. He drank like he drove, incredibly fast. I was relieved to get picked up that day, as walking alone was a slow and rough process. Plus, he had some extra sandwiches he was willing to share. When I arrived in Sacramento, I tried to find the kids on the street, only to discover that Sacramento was much smaller than I expected. I asked around, but the only suggestion I got was J Street Mall. I went down there looking for spare change to buy food. By then I'd learned a few secret tricks about living on the streets. It was important to remember if I was hungry, I needed to ask for alcohol. But if I wanted drugs or alcohol, I needed to ask for food. There are two main types of people that give you kickdowns, donations. The first is most common. They give you some change from their pocket. They like the fuzzy feeling they get from giving money to a kid with a sign that says, "Need food, God bless." The second is the rare whale. They give you $5 or even $20 if you're lucky. These people tend to prefer signs that say things like, "Not gonna lie, I want to get drunk." I needed to stay drunk all night and day, but I only needed to eat once per day. If I sat around waiting for a whale to get food, I'd be sober the whole time, lost in painful thoughts. I needed the trickling small change from regular people to keep the flow of cheap alcohol going, and then switch to what the whales like, alcohol signs, to get a kickdown for food. Sacramento had a decent heroin scene for its size, and I found it quickly. All I needed to do was find a train hopper and ask him where the Chiba was. They don't always do heroin, but they always knew where to get it. I even found a guy who tried to quit heroin and had become addicted to methadone. He gave me some in case I ran low on heroin, which did happen, especially between cities. I didn't stick around too long in Saktos. I had been sleeping under bridges there with local bums because there weren't enough street kids around. The sparing change wasn't fruitful. So I decided to head to nearby San Francisco. I had picked up a small single-speaker cassette player and some mixtapes some house punks gave me. Competition. The music on those tapes was harder and darker than even in my previous musical interests. Dystopia, Blood for Blood, His Hero Is Gone. Some of the music seemed tailor-made for my situation. Homeless kids, the unwanted, the abused, and the down and out surely could appreciate these bands. I listened to them over and over like all music I ever consumed. They were an important part of my experience. San Francisco seemed a bustling cluster of random humans to me. Everyone was running around looking busy all the time, unlike the California I grew up in. There were so many races and types of people. It was like a melting pot, but homeless kids and street performers were everywhere, so it was hard to get kickdowns. There was just too much competition. I went to the famous Haight and Ashbury district, expecting to see an ocean of hippies and counterculture, but instead found a tourist version of the hippie culture. Do actual hippies even exist anymore? I went to Oakland and Berkeley to check those places out. Berkeley was a place to go for kids on the streets. Everyone told me. I didn't enjoy it much, though. The kids were more standoffish and cliquey. In a city so saturated with punk and counterculture, I was just another face in the crowd. It was difficult to connect with anyone, and I didn't much like the weather, so I moved on. I hitched with truckers down to Los Angeles, stopping in Los Gatos and San Jose and Bakersfield first. In Bakersfield, where Spit was from. I thought of him and missed him. He was a good kid. Tamarind. By the time I finally got to Los Angeles, I was exhausted. I wandered around the city, trying to find Hollywood. I hitchhiked and took local buses, and finally ended up there. I had forgotten how spread out Los Angeles was. I hadn't seen my old Hollywood apartment in around 15 years. I was going to check it out, but first I needed sleep. I wandered around near Hollywood Boulevard, totally lost with no friends or places to go in my own city. Many of the street kids called me Smack, and many of them called me Hollywood, after my hometown. There I was finally in Hollywood, and I had nothing. I was a stranger in my own home. I thought my old life. I missed Cujo and Clovis. I remembered when I loved my mother. I remembered when I had a family. I fell asleep in the middle of the sidewalk just a short while after dawn. I laid on my backpack and just passed right out. When I awoke, 2 police officers were tapping me with their feet. Pig alarm. I slowly rose to my feet, groggy and depressed. They tried to check my ID, but I didn't have one to give. They asked for my name, and I told them. It was anyone's guess what they would do. In Seattle, the police arrested me in an almost exact mirror of this situation. No ID, jail. 48 hours later, they had to let me out. At this point, I didn't even care if they sent me to jail. It would be warm and there was food there. Jail even has blankets, and if I was lucky, pillows. They asked where I was heading to, and I told them. I'd hitchhiked down from San Francisco. They asked if I was a local, and I told them I wasn't. I certainly didn't feel like one anymore. They believed my name and story and probably didn't think I was too dangerous. One of them asked the other if he had seen me before. He hadn't. They handed me a card and told me to get some help. I thanked them and wandered off, tired enough to collapse again. I looked at the card, various churches spread out all over the city. Do they think I'm going to spare change for a bus to travel to a church for an hour of indoctrination and a bowl of soup? I eventually did find my old apartment on Tamarind Avenue. There it was, a tiny, unassuming little apartment building. The Shangri Lodge. It was dwarfed by the building across the street. Scientology Celebrity Center International. I realized that day this celebrity center was why my mother lived there. That was no coincidence. There was nothing around but Scientology buildings and Scientology staff. The cameras at CC followed me everywhere. Everywhere I went. Security guards on the perimeter rode bicycles, pretending not to be interested in me. Do they know who I am? I wondered a lot of crazy things that day. I was disoriented. How am I here again? I pondered what to do next and sought out a place to go, but there simply wasn't anywhere. Los Angeles wasn't a homeless-friendly city. There was just nothing to do, no way to get around, and nowhere to go to help other than churches. There was no centralized location. Some punk chicks randomly picked me up. They said they liked me, but they had the same standoffishness I found in the northern part of Cali. I didn't have much to gain by investing all this time and effort to gain their trust and friendship. I moved on from California quickly in the direction of Arizona. More hitchhiking, more loneliness and silence, more thoughts and reflection, more life in a dystopia. Flying J. After a series of short rides, I ran out of heroin and ended up stranded in Coachella, California. In small towns, it's nearly impossible to panhandle. So I focused on the basics. I ate what I found in dumpsters, outside grocery stores, in fast food restaurants when I could. For water, I got courtesy cups from restaurants, though some refused me service. I normally avoided truck drivers when I could because there were rumors on the streets of serial killer truckers in those days. But after a few days in Coachella, I was desperate, so I got a ride to the nearest truck stop. At Flying J Travel Plaza, a middle-aged trucker with glasses offered me a ride all the way to Phoenix. He was less threatening than some of the other truckers, so I felt pretty safe. He had finished his tour and was heading home to his wife in Phoenix, he told me. A couple of hours later, we were in the middle of nowhere, and I was exhausted, aching for more heroin, though I didn't mention that to him. He must have noticed, though, because he offered to pull over for rest. He opened a hidden door in his cabin that opened up to a little bed area and said, "You can sleep in here." "What about you?" I asked. "I'll sleep in front. It's fine. I do it all the time," he said. I laid my dirty heroin-starved body on the couch and conked out quickly. My eyes were still shut when I became conscious again. I felt a hand rubbing my pee. Sorry. I felt a hand rubbing my pee. No, 2 hands. Okay, think. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. This guy can K me, and no one would ever know or care. I need to get to Phoenix. I need to get there. If I attack this guy, he might have a weapon. He might. He started to slowly reach down the front of my pants. I pretended to roll over in my sleep so that my front was against the wall. Just leave me alone. I need this ride. I was risking getting knifed in the back. I knew that. I was risking him handcuffing me or R-ing me or worse. I was scared. Everything hinged on him not being a monster. He silently pulled back, sat up front, and started the truck. I lay there longer, pretending to be asleep. I knew he knew I wasn't asleep, but I had committed already. After another hour or so, he said, with a stern voice, "Hey, get up, we're in Phoenix." I woke up and rubbed my eyes. We were pulling into another truck stop. As soon as his truck stopped, I opened the door, hopped out, and said thanks. As I wandered off, he said, "Hey," but I didn't turn around. "Do I have any money on me? Anything can claim I stole?" "No good."